What's going on YouTube? I am back for another video, and this one is inspired by my recent push in solo Power League. Now, for those that you know me, I'm about 33,500 trophies, and I hardly ever play Power League, but you have to get those 50 wins if you want the super dope Jet Ski Jacky skin. So I was playing some solo Power League, and it was kind of a struggle compared to what I thought it was going to be. It was a lot harder than I anticipated, and I kind of observed what the 5 biggest, I guess, pieces of advice I would give to newer people or people who are struggling with Power League, just kind of how I was. I was in gold for way too long. I finally went on like a 15 game win streak or so and got myself into Diamond 1, and that got me the 50 wins that I needed. But there are definitely plenty of things that caused me a headache, and I feel like that players should just know. So whether you're a new player, whether you're a current player, or just someone that's stuck in that silver or gold range and really wants to get to Diamond or further, this is the video for you. I'd really appreciate if you all dropped a like and commented down below what you thought of the video, because it helps the channel grow so much. And with that being said, let's hop into the video. All right, hopping into tip number 1, the first piece of advice I can give is just because a brawler is power 10 does not mean they are always the best option. So I'm gonna use this battle right here from Nuts and Bolts, for example. My team composition actually ended up being pretty good. We picked Sandy, Dinah, and Penny, and I know a lot of people may think Dinah is a bad pick, but honestly for this map particularly, Dynamite is not a bad choice at all. But I'm going to pick on the other team a little bit. Obviously nothing personal. I don't know any of these people. This isn't a reflection on their gameplay or anything like that, but it is an educational commentary. I'm going to point out things that I think could have been better. So I'm gonna pick on this guy named Alki Gamer 993 for a hot second. So obviously a newer player of the game, doesn't even have 1,000 wins or anything. So clearly they're like newer to the game, which is totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I will say, going through the brawler list, for example, yes, Shelly is his only power 10 brawler. However, definitely better options than Shelly. I would argue that just because you have a brawler that's power 10 does not mean it is the go-to or only option, especially somebody like Shelly that's really a pretty terrible brawler in the meta right now. I think other options like El Primo or Barley, which are also brawlers at the top of his list that he's more comfortable at, even if they're a power 7, power 8, it's okay to pick those brawlers, especially if it favors you or is good for that map. So I would have gone with somebody like Barley here, Primo, who is very meta right now. Primo isn't necessarily somebody that like absolutely depends on their star power either. They're just kind of a strong brawler right now. So I would argue like picks like that may be a better option than just picking Shelly. Just because you have a power 10 option does not mean it's always the better option. And with that being said, hopping into our next tips. All right, hopping into our second piece of advice. My next piece of advice is that you should always be super careful about taking tanks with your first overall pick. Now, we just talked about a brawler like El Primo that is very meta in the game right now, a top 5 brawler for sure. But in Power League specifically, you're not playing a random matchup. Every single game, your opponent knows what you're picking, and you know exactly what your team composition is made of. So when you're doing a draft system like this, tanks are a very easy set of brawlers to counter. You have Ems, you have Colette, which are direct counters to somebody like El Primo. So for example, in this game mode, the first overall pick was El Primo on the other side, and I automatically knew I was taking Ems. Ems is a great brawler for this map, and in addition is somebody that counters El Primo directly. So it was a really easy matchup for us just to be able to get free kills off Primo like you're going to see in this game. There's not a lot that El Primo is going to be able to do against my team because we're countering him every single time. Additionally, they picked a Shelly too, which really helps because Ems plays pretty well into Shelly. But it's just so easy to counter them. And if you're picking up tank with like your third pick or your second pick, it may be a little harder for the enemy team to counter them at that point, but you always want to be really careful about taking a tanky brawler just because they're so easy to match up against and prepare for. And with that being said, we will hop on into our next piece of advice. All right, hopping into our third piece of advice, and my next thing that I would like to talk about is just because you see bushes on a map does not mean that shotgun brawlers are going to be favored. So Spring Onions, for example, is a map that is covered in bushes. There are many lanes that are just all bushes, and I think people kind of assume, especially newer players, that because there are bushes and there's invisibility, you can get the absolute surprise on somebody and shotgun them and get the kill. And while that may be true really early on, that practice is not going to last forever. So in this matchup, the opponents pick Daryl and Bull. And while Bull isn't really that bad right now for Heist, I would argue he's actually a decent pick. Our team also has brawlers that do really well into opening the map. So Colt, for example, is somebody that can absolutely shred through the bushes and make it even harder for the other team to hide in. So that's already going to be very tough for Bull and for Daryl to push up. In addition, we have Nita, who plays really well in the shotgun brawlers, actually. If she can charge super, she can spawn her bear down, and that's another body for shotgun brawlers to take. Nita can do really well into these other brawlers because if there's another extra brawler on the field, that's one more thing that tanks have to worry about, and they can really only shoot at one person at a time. So again, if you're gonna pick shotgun brawlers, remember, just because there's a lot of bushes does not mean that they will do well. While it can be maps that they do really well in, things like Spring Onions and Double Swoosh, I see this all the time where people will pick Bull or Shelly or Daryl thinking that it might be a good pick because they can surprise the opponent, but that doesn't always work out, especially when you're playing an opponent that has the ability to open up the map like Colt, and it's just not always the wisest choice. So with that being said, we will hop into our next piece of advice. All right, hopping into our fourth and final tips and tricks for what you're doing wrong in Power League. These are both very specific brawlers that I'm going to tell people to steer away from. And my first is Bo. At this point, I'm in the Gold 3 stage. I'm almost to Diamond 1, and I'm still seeing people pick Bo, and I'm not really sure why. I'm sure it's because of the mines, and also because he's a really easy brawler for people to get power 10 since you get him so early, but Bo really doesn't serve much purpose in this meta. He's really not a great brawler and is definitely bottom 5. I see Bo all the time in modes such as Hot Zone, or Siege, where people think on defense he's a really good option, or he can cover the entire Hot Zone. But there's just better brawlers out there. He really doesn't do a ton of damage. He has a very medium amount of health, and sure, sometimes you're going to get the surprise play with the mines, but as players get better, that's really not going to last too long. It's also kind of difficult to hit shots with him. He's not the easiest in the world. As you can see there, the shot kind of spreads out with Bo, so it takes a pretty skilled player to really make it work. Another brawler I'm going to tell people to steer away from that I see way too often as well is Edgar. And especially in this matchup, I'm really not sure why the enemy team picked Edgar. It was their final pick. We'd already picked Jean and Ems, who both have a pushback gadget. So in this instance, there's really no need for Edgar, but Edgar really mainly serves as, I guess, a squishy counter to throwers like Barley or Tick or somebody like that. But honestly, Mortis can just do that job, but better. Edgar is also, I would say, a bottom 5 brawler and really doesn't serve a lot of value. In this matchup, you're going to see that Ems can pretty much take the Edgar the whole time. I believe that's who they landed at the beginning, and we really don't have any problems with Edgar. So those are definitely 2 brawlers I would tell newer players to stay away from. And with that being said, that wraps up our top 5 tips and tricks for Power League. All right, that about wraps it up for this video. Let me know down below if you thought this video was helpful. I felt like every game I was running into one of these 5 issues, so I really thought it would be beneficial to make a video off it. Hope whether you're a newer player or someone that was kind of like me in that silver gold range and just trying to push up and get themselves those 50 wins, that you took someone away from it. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed the content and want more of it in the future. And with that being said, we will see you all in the next video.